How can we flourish in the second half of our lives? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Today, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Sally Cressman. She's an award-winning writer who's written children's Sunday school curricula, devotionals, articles, and has served in children's ministry for over 30 years. She actually started writing at age 40 and learned to swim in her neighborhood pool at age 57 and will publish her first book at age 64. So she's going to talk to us today about flourishing in life's second half. Welcome, Sally. I'm happy to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Well, thank you, Tina. Appreciate your inviting me. Yes.
So tell the audience, what makes you so passionate about helping other people flourish in the second half of life? We can tell in your bio that that's been your experience, but what made you feel led to go from children's ministry and writing for children to writing for people on the opposite end of the life age spectrum?
Well, when my kids all left the nest, it was like, okay, what's Sally going to do? So that was kind of the start of it. And then as I started moving along in my writing career and just other things, I just realized there were things that I wanted to do, but I was going to have to put time into it, and I was going to have to learn a lot of new skills. And so I just had to decide, am I going to do this, or am I going to just sit home and wish I had done this? And so I made the decision that I really wanted to learn, to keep learning. I don't want to just sit home and retire and wait for grandbabies to come, which is okay, but for me, that wasn't going to work. So yeah.
So was it more than just let's find something to do? Because that can be a motivation to dabble or to have a hobby, but to have a mission and passion that allows you to persevere through all the hard things of publishing to get there, you have to have sort of a calling placed on your heart. Was that the experience you had after you were just kind of searching, what's Sally going to do? Did God actually call you to this ministry of reaching people who are also in that situation of needing to have a purpose and flourish in that later year period of life?
Yeah, I think the writing part of it started when my daughter was going to third grade. It was called Bible Skills. And my daughter, she was excited about it, but every parent I talked to had said they weren't excited about the class and they wish it'd be done differently. And so I just something came to me and said, well, you can do that. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And so I talked to the children's minister, and I just started writing and writing and writing because I wanted parents to, I just had this heart. I wanted them to know that their kids are really learning the scriptures and learning about God and Jesus and learning practical spiritual disciplines. And so I think that's kind of what started it. And then I went to her name is Florence Littauer. She had a class, it was called Christian Leaders, Authors, Speaker Seminar. And I went to that class of hers. And when I went there, I just felt this calling like, okay, this is what I want you to do, Sally, right? I don't know what that looked like. I don't really know exactly what God wanted me to do, but I just kept doing the next thing, I think is what it is. And then it came to the point where I started writing more for children, and then my church, there's all these little things started coming to me. And then I had to decide, do I want to keep this a hobby or do I want to start making money and make this more a business? And there again, it's a scary step to kind of put yourself out there. And I had to just keep making that decision and keep taking that next step. And it is scary, but I wanted to, I feel like I've already raised my children. I feel like older people have this wisdom to share. And it's kind of our job to go ahead and share that with parents and others who are going through the stage of life that maybe we've already gone through. So I think that that's part of the passion of just wanting to help other people and not go through some of the heartaches I did, but also just to train up children in the way they should go and give them the tools to do that. So yeah.
So, what I'm hearing you say is your passion for helping children be trained up in the way that they should go is also similar to helping train up people who are in your own peer group and beyond you to continue to go the way that God wants them to go, and help them have the tools and resources to achieve their best in that season of life, no matter what it is, whether it's childhood, parenting, age of life, or later in life. God isn't done with us. And like you said, you're saying that God doesn't always give us this big, long range vision of everything we're going to do in this calling. Sometimes He gives us one step at a time, and it's about doing the next right thing. So that's kind of maybe your first key point. Doing the next right thing that God calls you to do would help you flourish in your season of life. What is the second thing that you want people to know about flourishing in this season of life they're in, if it's the second half even?
Well, first of all, you have to make the decision, do I want to just retire and continue doing what I'm doing? Or is there something, do you have a passion? Is there something, a hobby or some gift or talent that you've had that you haven't been able to really expound on it or really dig into learning how to do that? So I was not a writer. My actual business major, I was a business administration major. So I did not have a journalism background. I did not have English literature. So I had to go back, and you have to learn the skills. And it takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of grace. But if you want to go to that next level, you really have to learn some new skills. And it can be scary, but it's also really exhilarating and it's fun once you start getting in that path that God has for you in this is later life. So it's almost like going back to school and having to learn. For me, I had to go back and I got a SAT grammar workbook that I had to work through. I took some classes on grammar, and so you're going to have to repurpose yourself, and you're going to have to retrain. And so there's a lot of this that you're gonna have to do. But don't let that hinder you. Enjoy the process, because now it's like you don't have to go to school, but you can, and you can choose what you want. So I think that's the really exciting part of this latter season of life, is that you get to choose now what you want to do, and not what maybe your parents told you had to do, or what the culture or the world was telling you to do. So I think that's the exciting part of it, is that you get to repurpose yourself with the gifts and talents that God has given you of your choice.
So I'm hearing you say two things there, two extra steps. And one of those would be to choose to move forward and not just stagnate in the last part of your life. And then the next thing would be to repurpose yourself by setting up systems and being willing to learn new skills. If you're not willing to put in the work, you're not going to have the results. So you have to be willing to put in the time, the work, and the effort, even if it isn't easy and it isn't what you've done before. Is that kind of what you're saying? What would be the next thing that people can do to start applying themselves toward flourishing in that season of their life? They've already made the decision to do it. They've already decided that they're willing to learn those steps. So what would be the next thing to make sure that you're actually flourishing in that process and enjoying it?
You can expect that there will be failures, like anything new. You can expect that there are going to be doubts and lies. So just expect that there will be trials, there'll be bumps, there'll be obstacles along the way. And don't let that stop you, because once you get past that, you become stronger, I believe, in what you're doing. You become better at what you're doing. And so don't let those things bring you down. And along with that, you might want to get a community of people to, when you do get in that kind of dark space, the where you're really doubting yourself and you're really getting down on yourself, to get with a group of people who will say, Sally, stop it. Stop saying that. That's not true what you're saying is, or they'll say, oh, I've been there too, don't give up. Or, so I have, as a writer, I have critique groups. I go to conferences where there are other writers. And so all these people really encourage me. And after I go to that, I just feel like I can write anything, And before you went, you're like, why am I even doing this? You're so frustrated and you feel like you're so far behind and you have so much to learn. So I would just say, don't let the obstacles stop you. Just go through them. You go through that obstacle, go through that lie, tear down that lie. Don't believe those doubts. So I guess that would be another.
You've got another couple of great tips there. Press through the setbacks and make sure you got a supportive team to help encourage you when you get down. So, Sally, before we move on into the second half of our conversation, how can people get a copy of your book when it comes out? And how can people find you and stay connected with you?
It is a Easter book, children's Easter book, and it shares the joyful response to creation over Jesus's resurrection. And it's available on Amazon. It's available on Endgame Press, my publisher. It's available on Barnes and Noble, or you can go to my website, sallycressman.com, my name.com. And there's a link there also. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, a little bit on Twitter, and a little bit on LinkedIn, but those are different areas that you can contact me.
In the second half of our conversation with Sally Cressman, we're going to dive into some more tips on how to flourish in life's second half. Sally, you mentioned some great tips in the first half of our conversation. Are there any other tips that you would like to offer the audience on how to make sure that they're implementing the habits and the practices that'll keep them on target to fulfilling God's purpose in their lives in the second half of life?
So yes, one area that I really had to work on is technology. And so as you get older, it seems like technology moves faster. It seems like a unusual thing that you have to tackle, but an obstacle, but it certainly is something that I think anything that you do, you have to figure out technology. And it's very frustrating, honestly. And so I have to call my children, get a hold of if you have kids, get a hold of a teenager, and you're going to have to figure it out, the social media stuff and some of this or whatever. I think whatever you do, technology is going to be involved. I have a friend who's going to be, she's going to school to be a librarian. And that was the hardest thing for her, was just to figuring out how to post things. So technology is another step that you're going to have to learn to kind of move ahead with what's going on yeah.
Well, I love that point because it kind of lends itself to your overall ministry, which is both to children and parents and also the grandparents that are going to be nurturing and cultivating and legacy and sending things down. That is a wonderful model that we can look at where you are incorporating being mentored by the next generation with you having an opportunity to be with people in the next generation to mentor them spiritually with wisdom, with all the things that you were talking about earlier that we have to offer that we've learned through experience, through life experience with the people who are younger. And then they can have that opportunity to feel valuable to us as they're teaching us those things that they are born and grown up in the technology realm of our culture. So that's a great thing to think about as far as mutually benefiting with from one generation to the next and having intergenerational opportunities for mentoring both ways, actually.
Yeah, and that's very biblical too. I mean, that
what is another thing that we could be doing in the second half of life?
So one other thing that I really had to deal with was some emotional healing from past hurts and something I did not deal with, and some family dysfunction. And I had to decide, I had forgiven my parents, but I hadn't really dealt with it. And so if you have some issues, anybody, I mean, we all have things that we need to deal with. Um, once I dealt with that, not only spiritually, but going to a counselor and dealing with the hurts from that and things, I felt this like freedom and to now share this story with others. And it also just kind of freed me to do now with the things I wanted to do with this lightness of spirit and this joy, and not be burdened down by some of the things from the past. So even though, we're older, there might be some things that we haven't dealt with yet. And so I think it's really important to be brave and to deal with those things, whatever they are. It's hard because pride gets in the way, and there's this fear of thinking like you don't want people to know that something was wrong with you. A few years ago, I really had to deal with some issues. And so I think that really propelled me into just this healing and this freedom. And so I would really encourage you, whatever age you're at, is anything any hurt, anything that might be considered trauma, no matter how big or how little, is still trauma. And so we need to deal with that. And I think that really will set us free and then help us to really focus on what it is God wants us to do. So it happens in the later season too. That was a big one for me.
Yeah, that would be the difference between flourishing and faltering in the second half of your life, whether you are willing to do the work with mentors, counselors, life coaches to get fully healed and renewed so that you can flourish and have something beautiful to offer as your legacy, rather than the festering of wounds, brokenness, and bitterness that can turn us even more unhappy and more miserable and kind of paying forward misery instead of blessings with your attitude in that second half of life. So it's worth it. And that is a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up, Sally. That's brilliant. You can be better or you can be bitter, as they say, but you have to make the choice to work through that. And thinking that you're past that season, which I've heard a lot of people say sometimes when they're in that season of life and they don't end well. They don't end their lives well because they think, oh, well, it's too late. I am what I am. And I'm past the time when I could have healed from that. And I guess I'm fine. I'm going my way out anyway. It's how are you going out? I mean, are you going out with the way that you're going to be a blessing to other people around you? Or are you going out without being the blessing and instead sharing that bitter attitude everywhere you go at the end?
And along with that is not just the emotional part of it, but we really need to take care of the whole body, especially as we age. I had a lot of family members, they seem to be dying younger and younger and younger. And so a few years ago, I decided that I had to start making just some habits to be physically able to keep doing what I want to do. And so I had already started swimming, but I ran my first 5K just this past year. And so started doing some weight training and making changes in food. So you have to really, another thing is look at that whole body, the whole person, rather, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual, the relational, all those different things I think are really important to as we get into the latter years. One thing we found out is after our kids became empty nesters, is that we realized that our friends were really their friends' parents. And then when that went away, when they were no longer there, those relationships dried up. And so we really had to be intentional. I had to be intentional about building those relationships. So I think as we go older, we really need to make sure that we are developing relationships and we have these different communities that we can belong to. was watching this show called The Blue Zones of people, groups of people that live to be 100. And one of the things that they said in there is that those people who live longer, not that I want to live to be 100, but it's that they have this built-in community, and it's not only just immediate family, but it's a community of other people. And so those are other things that as we grow older, we need to be really intentional about, is building those relationships, working on the physical aspect, the spiritual aspect, all of that. We're just not done when we retire. So there's so much more that we can keep working on. Yeah.
This has been so valuable. I love those tips. And I do love that blue zone idea that you have really fleshed out in all the tips that you've offered here. Are there any last minute tips that you would like to leave with the audience on how to flourish in life's second half?
Yeah, I heard not too long ago, I think is it Johnny Erickson Tata? She was on another podcast, and she, I don't know if you, for those in the audience that don't know her, but she's quadriplegic. She has been since she was a teenager, but she also has this ministry to those with special needs. And she had this quote. She said, "I'm not going to rust out, but squeeze every ounce of effort that I can out of this quadriplegic body to encourage others." She's 74 years old. She's been a quadriplegic since she was a teenager. So if Johnny Erickson Tata can do that, I think I can squeeze a little bit more out of mine. And then I also found this Bible verse that goes just so beautifully with your theme of your podcast. It's in Psalm 92, 12, 14. If you don't mind me reading it. Do we have it? Said, "But the godly will flourish like palm trees and grow strong like the cedars of Lebanon, for they are planted to the Lord's own house. They flourish in the courts of our God. Even in their old age," this is the point here, "they will still produce fruit. They will remain vital and green. They will declare the Lord is just. He is my God. There's no evil in him." And I just love that because you can still flourish. God wants you to still flourish in this latter life. The word retirement isn't even in the Bible. So, but that's his promise that they will still produce fruit. They can still remain vital and green. And so I'm holding on to that, and I hope your audience will too. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sally, for all of your wisdom that you've offered today. I hope that all of you listening will contact Sally and tell us exactly where they can find a copy of your book.
You can find my book, The Dance of Easter. It's available with Endgame Press. It's available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and you can also check it out on my website, sallycressman.com. There's a link also there to check it out.
Thank you all for listening to our conversation about how to flourish in the second half of life. I hope that you will check out Sally's Easter book for children. And of course, I also hope that you hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.